Hey everyone, I'm ArmorGaming, welcome back to my channel and welcome to Monster Analysis. Up for analysis today is a light legendary monster known as Ahran. This knight has the most old-fashioned gallantry, but his equipment and armor are all high-tech. He is a warrior of light, devoted to protecting the defenseless and the innocent. Ahran, in my opinion, has one of the most amazing designs in the whole entire game. To be completely honest, he looks like he can almost be a VIP. He looks almost like Kai the Eradicator or Uther the Valiant. Great design, but anyways, we're here to analyze stats. And before I dive into the stats, I have to say that there are currently 19 light legendary monsters, so I'm going to be comparing his stats to all of those monsters. His power comes in at 3,146, and if you think that's pretty low, that's because it is. This actually puts him in 15th place. Now, when it comes to light monsters, a lot of them tend to be supportive monsters, and when you have supportive monsters, it's okay if they have a low power, but this monster is actually more of a tank / an attacker, so it would have been nice to have a higher power. Unfortunately, he's in 15th place. His life, on the other hand, is really nice, 32,572. This is the second highest life for light legendary monsters, and it's second only to Hasai. So he has a fantastic life stat, and you're going to see with some of his skills, this monster can be rather difficult to defeat. And lastly, he has a speed of 3,399, and unfortunately this puts him tied for 10th place along with King Darren. So overall, I would say he has a rather poor power, a really great life, and a rather mediocre speed for light legendary monsters. As for his trait, Ahran is immune to possession, thus making him the second light legendary monster to be immune to possession, the first of which was Incognita. So because Ahran has this trait, this makes him really usable in team wars involving magic monsters and dark monsters. Lots of dark monsters have possession skills, and of course lots of magic monsters have possession skills. As for how well does he compare against other light monsters, lots of light monsters tend to dish out blind and daze. So if you do happen to face off other light legendary monsters and you happen to be blinded or dazed, it's going to be really hard to land a hit. Nonetheless, I personally think it's great for him to be immune to possession. I really like that Social Point is introducing more legendary monsters that have an immune. Let's talk about his skills. We have Holy Strike, Glowing Blast for the default skills, nothing too special there. As for his special skill, Divine Reckoning, deals massive light damage to all enemies. His ultimate attack is a light based skill that deals 75 damage to all of the enemy monsters. Now there's not really too much to say about the skill. You guys have heard me say it enough. I would have preferred if this skill was special based as opposed to light based, but I will give him this. Because this monster is a usable monster in team wars involving dark monsters, because he's immune to possession, the fact that he does have a light based special attack, that can help him out, but it's only in that one scenario when you're going up against dark monsters. In every other scenario, you would really want a special based attack. Anyways, the damage output is just perfect. 75 damage is a lot. Even though this monster doesn't have the highest power, you can always remedy a monster's low power with a really high level strength rune. Really quickly, I'm going to breeze through skills group 1. We have Startling Impact, Blazing Orb, Devout Protection. There's nothing too special here. So on to skills group 2. So we start things off with Strength Siphoned. Deals moderate special damage, may apply damage reduction to target. This is a special based skill that deals 45 damage to a single enemy. It costs only 28 stamina and it has no cooldown. At the same time, it gives damage reduction to one enemy monster. Damage reduction is pretty straightforward. It reduces the monster's damage output by 25%. Now at first glance, this skill honestly doesn't look that amazing. However, I will say this is probably one skill you will have to run. So starting things off with the damage output, 45 isn't a lot, especially when you consider the fact that this monster already has a lower than usual power. However, it is special based as opposed to light based, so that will help you out when you're fighting against another light monster. 28 stamina, no complaints there. 0 turn cooldown, no complaints there. You can spam the skill as much as you have to. And then the fact that this skill gives damage reduction to an enemy monster, that can really help you out. Because as I mentioned previously, lots of light monsters tend to be supportive monsters, which means lots of light monsters actually have buff skills. They either buff themselves or they can buff a teammate. They can give themselves a damage boost or double damage. So if you're facing off against a light monster and they give a buff either to themselves or to a teammate, you would be able to remove that buff with Strength Siphoned. However, I also have to mention that this monster is one of those monsters that can give himself damage return. You know, when the enemy monster attacks him, he returns a percentage of the damage he receives, and in that case, giving damage reduction to the enemy monster, that kind of works against you. Because when you have a monster that can return damage, you want to take as many hits as possible. You don't want to be reducing the amount of damage you receive. So you do have to keep that in mind. But overall, I would still say this is a skill you should probably be running. And next we have Celestial Power. Gains a 30% shield, gains double damage, requires cooldown. So this is a self skill that costs 27 stamina with a 3 turn cooldown. You get a 30% shield and double damage. Now a 30% shield on this monster, that's going to mean that he can take over 9,000 damage. The fact that he gives himself double damage, that's pretty nice because it kind of compensates his low power. It only costs 27 stamina, which is awesome, and my only gripe with this skill is the 3 turn cooldown. That seems a little bit too high for me. Now Celestial Power, this skill you may or may not want to run. It depends on the kind of build you want to make. And I'll expand a little more on that once I talk about Deliverance. Deals moderate light damage, returns 50% of received damage, requires cooldown. So this is a light based skill that targets a single enemy, dealing 40 damage, costing 28 stamina with a 2 turn cooldown. And with this skill, Ahran will also get damage return, which will reflect 50% of the received damage for the following 2 turns. So considering Ahran can be pretty tanky, having the second highest life for light legendary monsters, and given the fact that you can give this monster 1 or 2 life runes, Deliverance, then having a skill that reflects damage, that can be really powerful. But one thing I have to point out is that Celestial Power and Deliverance, this isn't going to work hand in hand. Celestial Power, because you give yourself that small shield, that's going to work against you. Instead of Ahran taking damage, the shield is going to be absorbing the damage. So even if you have damage return, you're not going to be reflecting anything. And then when you look at Deliverance and Strength Siphoned, if you reduce the enemy attacker's damage output by 25%, then that means that monster is going to be dealing less damage to you. In which case, that kind of works against the whole return damage again. So as you can see, the skills from Skills Group 2, they don't really have too much synergy. The synergy that does exist is between Strength Siphoned and Celestial Power, because if you're reducing an enemy's damage output by 25%, then your small shield will be able to take more hits and last longer. But like I said a little earlier, depending on the kind of build you want to go for, any of these skills can be good. Anyways, let's move down to Skills Group 3. Starting things off, Deity Taunt. Deals very heavy special damage, will receive all single target attacks, requires cooldown. This skill is a special based attack that targets one single enemy with 60 damage, costing 31 stamina and having a 1 turn cooldown. And this skill also gives you protection, which lasts 2 turns. Now in my opinion, Deity Taunt is the best skill that Ahran has. First of all, it's special based. Second of all, it deals 60 damage, which is really good. The stamina cost is a little high at 31, but that's fine. The cooldown, only a 1 turn cooldown, that is awesome, especially when protection lasts for 2 turns. Now the fact that this skill gives you protection, that is awesome for multiple reasons. Protection has amazing synergy with the rest of his skills. At the same time, protection in Team Wars can help your third monster, you know, the common, uncommon, the rare, it can help that monster stay alive. Now it's not guaranteed it'll stay alive, but it does give you a better chance. As you know, when a monster has protection, all single target hits are going to be directed towards that monster with protection. So it doesn't help you against AoEs, but it helps you against single target hits. And because Deity Taunt has a 1 turn cooldown and protection lasts for 2 turns, that means throughout the whole duration of the game you can have protection on. And if there's any one skill that's a must have for Ahran, it would be this skill. The next skill he has is called Reap What You Sowed. Returns 75% of received damage, requires cooldown. So it's a self skill that costs only 25 stamina, has a 3 turn cooldown, and with this skill you'll be reflecting 75% of damage for the following 2 turns. So a very similar skill to Deliverance. Deliverance deals 40 damage, whereas this skill deals no damage. Deliverance returns 50% of damage, whereas this skill deals 75% of damage. Both skills have their pros and cons. Deliverance is nice that it deals an initial 40 damage, and especially if you were to take this monster in the Team Wars involving Dark and Light, having that light based attack against a dark monster, that could really help you out. Whereas Reap What You Sowed, it deals no initial damage, so that really sucks, especially if you're planning to run at least 1 strength rune on this monster. And I'm sure many of you realize the same combo you can do with Deity Taunt and Deliverance, you can do it with Deity Taunt and Reap What You Sowed. You would use Deity Taunt to deal that initial 60 damage, and the following turn you would use Reap What You Sowed to return 75% of the damage you receive. And if that's going to be your strategy for the game, I would probably recommend you not to run any strength rune. It might just be better to run 2 life runes and a speed rune, or I guess if you really want a strength rune, 2 life runes and a strength rune. But I also have to warn everyone about this combo, I don't think it's that good. Yeah, initially returning 75% of damage, that seems really good, but I feel like Reap What You Sowed has the worst synergy with all of his skills. Like when you try to combo this skill with his other skills, regardless of what skill it is, it really has some terrible synergy. So let me talk about the last skill and then I'll get back to Reap What You Sowed. Godly Influence gains a 50% shield, gains precision, gains damage boost, requires cooldown. Another self skill, it costs 30 stamina, has a high 4 turn cooldown, you get a 50% shield, that's a big shield, you get increased precision, and you get a damage boost, which is a 50% boost. So like I mentioned early on in the video, this monster can be rather difficult to defeat because he has a high tanky life, he can give himself a small shield, he can give himself a big shield, and at the same time that he gives himself one of the shields, he's also giving himself either a damage boost or a double damage boost. So yeah, although this monster doesn't have the highest base power to begin with, because he can give himself buffs at the same time that he gives himself shields, he can still make quite a good attacker. But now let's go back and discuss why I think Reap What You Sowed has the worst synergy. I mentioned earlier that the obvious combo is to do Deity Taunt and then Reap What You Sowed. But now my question to you would be, what would you follow up with after that? If you were to run Godly Influence and decided to use that skill, well, your big shield would work against your returning 75% damage. If you were to run Celestial Power and use that skill, well again, the small shield would work against your returning 75% damage. Well, how about running Deliverance? Deliverance returns 50% of received damage. So basically your return 75% of damage would be reduced to only returning 50% of damage. So that obviously sucks, right? Now however, I should probably mention, if Reap What You Sowed was to actually stack with Deliverance, then you could just disregard what I say, and this is a feasible skill set you can do, and in that case Reap What You Sowed isn't that bad. But that's only if it was to stack, and I honestly don't think it does stack. So if anyone has this monster and has tested it out, please let me know in the comments below. I'm just gonna operate under the assumption that it doesn't stack, and if you do Reap What You Sowed and then Deliverance, well, you just went from returning 75% damage to 50% damage. That sucks. So then that only leaves one skill, Strength Siphoned. And what does Strength Siphon do? It reduces the monster's damage output by 25%, which once again works against the whole damage return. The whole point of having damage return is for the enemy monster to inflict as much damage on you, so then you're able to return even more damage to the enemy monster. But if you're reducing the enemy monster's damage output, you're basically reducing the amount of damage you're gonna deal when they deal damage to you. So Reap What You Sowed, it just has completely terrible synergy. Your one saving grace is what I say is your one must-have skill if you were to use this monster, Deity Taunt, because it has a 1 turn cooldown, you can start the game off with this skill, then use Reap What You Sowed, and then you'd be able to use Deity Taunts again. But then after that, you're gonna have to find a different skill to use. Anyways, with all that being said, let's get into some skill sets. So the first skill set I'm gonna talk about involving the skill I bashed a lot, Reap What You Sowed, Deity Taunt, Deliverance, and Godly Influence. And with this skill set, you would want to give Ahran 2 life runes and a speed rune, 2 life runes and a strength rune, or maybe just 1 strength, 1 life, and 1 speed rune. But if you do choose to use the skill set, really lean towards a rune set that involves 2 life runes, because you're gonna need it. The whole point of this skill set is just to make Ahran really tanky, that he takes a lot of hits and reflects a lot of damage. That's really all there is to it. The second skill set for this monster, and in my opinion what I think is the better skill set, and if I had this monster, this is the skill set I would run: Deity Taunt, Godly Influence, Celestial Power, Strength Siphoned. You can completely forget about running either return damage skill, because quite honestly they just don't work that well with the rest of your skills. Anyways, if you do choose the skill set, you would just make him like a regular attacker, 2 strength runes and 1 speed rune. And for some of you, depending what level you are, where you're at the game, you might be able to get away without even using a speed rune, and you'd be able to do 2 strength runes and a life rune, and that would just make him even more tanky. So the reason I chose these 4 skills is because they probably work the best together. You would be able to start off any game with Deity Taunt, dealing a nice amount of damage and at the same time applying protection to your monster, thus potentially protecting your weaker monsters. On the following turn, you can use either Celestial Power or Godly Influence. Celestial Power would give you a small shield and double damage, which would help reduce the amount of damage you take, as well as setting up for your next attack, another Deity Taunt if needed. Or if you were to use Godly Influence, you would give yourself a big shield, thus you would be able to absorb even more damage, which would especially come in handy if you're going up against some enemies that have some really high level strength runes, and you know for a fact that a small shield just isn't enough. At the same time, you would give yourself a damage boost, which although isn't double damage boost, it's still good because you get an added precision, so your next hit isn't going to be missing. Oh, and another benefit to Godly Influence is that if you are going up against a light monster and you are blinded, after you use Godly Influence, that precision will take away the blind. So just another reason why this skill is good. And then obviously you would want to run Strength Siphon because it's a spammable skill that you can use whenever you need to, and it gives damage reduction to the enemy monster, which just helps your shields out. So the cool thing about this monster is that throughout the duration of the match, he's quite possibly always going to have protection on, and there's always either a small shield or a big shield he can use, and if not, he can always give damage reduction to the enemy monster, so that really helps him out. Ahran is certainly the first light tanky monster we've seen. Hopefully we see a whole lot more. I really love this monster's design. I'm a little disappointed that his skills don't have that much synergy, but you can still make a really nice effective build. My overall impression of this monster is that I really do like him. I feel that Social Point tried to introduce something that we haven't really seen with light monsters, and they were successful with that. As far as is this monster worth purchasing if he ever goes on sale, that's a little harder to answer. As of the time recording this video, I think I'd have to lean more towards no. However, with that being said, I definitely think this monster can become one of the better monsters as the meta changes, and from what I've seen with other monsters, it does appear to me that the meta is going to be slowly changing. Social Point is really starting to give us a lot of monsters that have traits that work against other elements. For example, light monster immune to possession, or a light monster immune to freeze, or a water monster immune to possession. And with the introduction of those kinds of monsters with those kinds of traits, I really do think the meta is slowly going to be changing. So once again, as of the time recording this video, I wouldn't say this monster is a must-have, but as the meta changes, I definitely think this monster can become one of the better monsters. So I don't know if that helps you decide whether this monster is worth purchasing or not worth purchasing. As the game does progress and develop, I'm going to try my best to give you guys an updated list on what I think the better monsters are. Anyways, with that being said, let me know what you guys think about this monster. Do you think he's worth purchasing right now? Do you think he's not worth purchasing? What do you guys think about him? Do you like him? Do you not like him? Let me know whatever's going on through your head in the comments below. Also, be sure to let me know what monster you want to see analyzed next. With that being said, I hope everyone has a great amazing day or a great amazing night. Remember to dream big and pursue your passions.